Welcome to the FI Investors Podcast, helping you achieve financial independence through real estate investing, one episode at a time. We talk about personal finance, mindset, and real estate investing. Whether you're a rookie or looking to scale your portfolio, we're here to provide you with the tactics and actionable steps to achieve your goals. Here are your hosts, Diego Corzo and Ward Mahoney.
Adam, how are you? How are you, my friend?
Diego, I'm so good, man. It's so good to see you and spend time with you. I'm excited to find out where this conversation takes us.
Yes. This is the FI Investor Podcast. And Adam, I have to give you a huge shout out because we've built FI Investors with the whole premise of build a bigger life, not a bigger lifestyle. And that's one thing that you taught me back in, I think I met you back in 2011 or 2012.
Yeah.
You were my first mentor ever. And build a bigger life, not a bigger lifestyle was something that I share in almost every podcast that I do with everybody that I meet of why I do things. And that is the whole premise of financial independent investors.
Yeah.
And I was just talking with somebody else today and telling him how basically so I recorded a podcast with you back in 2013, and it was the first podcast ever that I recorded in my life. And I was super nervous. This is when I was working at General Motors. Yes. And I remember that the only time that I could do it was during my lunch hour. So I did it in a room, and I actually want to go back and hear it just to see how nervous I was. Number one, how like if you ask me about where I was going in the future or whatever, just like how, like what I was saying back in the day, 10 years ago till now, I'm going to share that, and we're going to put it in the show notes for sure.
I bet you couldn't even fathom 10 years ago where you are today.
Yeah.
I mean, you've always been a huge thinker, Diego, and I credit you for that. But more than a thinker, you're a doer. Mm-hmm. And I remember the interview, and have actually gone back and listened to all of the Build a Bigger Life podcasts. Yours is one of my favorite because you tell the story of selling websites and riding your bike in the Austin heat or the Florida heat, to small businesses and selling on websites, sweating through your clothes and changing into your suit and all that stuff. It's just awesome to see where you've come. And, it's a true testament to your drive, your determination, stick-to-itiveness, all of the above. It's just awesome.
Yes. No, thank you, Adam, because you've been there from the beginning. Literally, I wouldn't have started if it wasn't from the mindset stuff that you showed me, the books to read, the support that you gave me. I mean, you were one of those people that I called when all the banks told me that I couldn't qualify for a loan. And you gave me ideas, and you told me, hey, this is just a stepping stone for what is to come. We'll figure it out. Right. And after your call, I called my dad. So and then with my dad, I was able to partner up and buy that house and all of that stuff. And then I have to give you a shout out too for helping me with my TED Talk, with my TEDx talk, because you've coached me through it. I asked you one day, hey, when do you have time to walk word for word for my TED Talk? And you're like, I have it at like 6:30 in the morning or 6 in the morning. I was
6:30.
Like, let's do it.
Yeah.
So thank you for that too.
Oh man, it's my pleasure.
Yes.
It's been just, again, it's been a joy to watch you do what you do, and, be invited to the White House and all the things that have come from that.
Yes.
It's, who'd have thought 10 years ago, man?
That would be crazy. Yes. So thank you, Adam. But one of the things that, of course, I wanna have you share a bit was on the impact that you've made in my life. But it all started with you teaching me that money is a game. And I remember reading the book that you had on winning the money game and how impactful that has been for my life. But can you share a little bit on how winning the money game has like give a little introduction to, by the way, to the audience. I know
Yeah.
we were talking about how you've changed my life, but little introduction about what you do, what you've done, and winning the money game as a whole in life.
Yeah. Well, I suppose going back to when it all began,
Please.
I graduated from college a debt statistic, like many people do. I'd grown up in a household that my parents were great. They provided everything, but my dad's financial advice was go buy mutual funds. And it was probably good advice at the time, but it wasn't enough for me to get where I wanted to go. And when I got out of college, I realized that I had been a rich college kid, and I quickly became a broke professional. And I knew that if I was going to play this game of money, I had to play the game to win. And to play the game to win, you have to understand the rules of the game, which no one had really taught us before. And I think that's where I got the idea for Winning the Money Game. The book was, hey, we're all playing this game. Some people don't even know they're playing it yet, but they've been playing it for years and losing the entire time. And you don't really know you're losing until you're really losing. And so I started speaking on college campuses back in 2004. And from then until now, I've been on 750 college campuses, been everywhere from Florida State University, on the East Coast, to the University of Spoiled Children on the West Coast. And I realized that students just didn't have like the foundational understanding of money that they needed to get ahead. And I wanted to start teaching that in a really fun, exciting way. And so it was a program, a book, turned into a documentary on student loan debt, 2 TED Talks, 3 more books later, and now a software that helps people get out of debt and, build financial freedom for themselves. That's kind of been the last 20 years evolution of my life.
Yeah, no, and that's great. And you've impacted a lot of lives. And on that part of winning the money game, right? Like you said, you've sharing in 750 stages and the universities and all of that. Number one, like I mentioned, you've impacted a lot of those students, right? That because then you created an event called Succeed Faster.
Yeah.
And that's where you basically put in the top college students that you met throughout, and then you put us in a room for a weekend and magic happened. And everybody's kicking butt, doing so many different things. And
Totally.
it's like having the it factor, as you call it, right?
Yes.
What do you think is that it factor that makes people succeed in winning the money game?
The it factor that we looked for, and when we started that program, it was Tim Augustine and I, who, still to this day, a dear friend and crushing it in business. Tim's one of those guys that we will be sailing on a yacht somewhere together. I'm sure of it. And when Tim and I started the program, we were noticing that there were people we met that just stood out. And it was guys like you, guys like Pascal, the Amanda Bolins and Molly Rose Speed, and all these people that we would meet, that we were like, gosh, have you met so-and-so? And he'd say, no, I haven't, but you should meet this person. And one night, over a couple of bottles of wine, candidly, we were like, what if we just did this thing and we put all these people in the room together? What kind of magic would happen? And I think to answer your question about what is the it factor, it was little things, Diego. Like, if you came up to me after an event and you said, I really want to know how to do X, Y, and Z, and do you mind if I email you, or can I connect with you on LinkedIn? And you actually did it, and then you followed up with a thank you note or an email afterwards. It was those little things that separated, the wheat from the chaff, the people that were like, oh, I want something in my life, but it was fleeting and I forgot all about it the next day. A guy like you're a bit, to describe you adequately, I would call you like a dog with a bone. When you get an idea, you're after it. Like, you're not going to let it go. You're going to see it through to completion. And I think those that have the it factor, they have very similar characteristics. They'll learn, they'll go over, around, and through whatever obstacle is there to make it happen. And this is a big deal today. When I interview people, I'm looking for a high level of A2FSO. Have we talked about this?
No. What is that?
So A2FSO, it stands for ability to figure shit out. Because if you
Mm.
have the ability to figure shit out, you're going to be successful. And, I lump my 16-year-old son in this category. He came down one day, he goes, Dad, I started a Shopify page and I'm selling products. I connected it with AliExpress and I'm going to do drop shipping and all this stuff. And I was like, how did you figure this out? He goes, I just a couple of YouTube videos and I was dinking around. And I said, that is what we need to celebrate, because people who
Mhm.
figure that stuff out and are not blocked by, I don't know how, and I have to find someone who can do this for me kind of thing. No,
Mhm.
figure it out yourself. Have a high level of A2 FSO. So those are just a couple of the things we look
Yes.
for. Yeah.
Yes. No, that's awesome. That's awesome. And tell us a little bit how you came up with the motto that has helped me a lot of like
Yeah.
building a bigger life, not a bigger lifestyle. Because by me living with that motto, it allowed me to decide that I didn't want to buy that super nice furniture and everything in the beginning.
Yeah.
And you told me you can have anything you want in life.
Yeah.
You cannot have it just right now.
Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah,
it's those things
exactly.
that I took for your presentation. But please share on that.
What's amazing to me is that was 11, 12 years ago when you heard me say that. Um, but I always said, if you do for 2 years what most people won't do, you can do for the rest of your life what most people can't do. And most people won't scrimp and save for 2 years, or, in our world, it's pay down a mortgage and create equity and then deploy that equity into other cash flow producing assets. What you're asking about, the build a bigger life, not a bigger lifestyle, came about as a result of a conversation with a recent college graduate who said, I'm just not loving my life right now. And I said, well, tell me about it. What don't you love? And she said, I thought I'd be traveling a lot. I thought I'd get to go see the world in my 20s. And now I'm just stuck in this job, and it's not a job that I love. I like it, but I don't love it. And I feel stuck in it. And I said, well, what is it about the job that you feel is necessary to fulfill where you're at in life right now? And she's like, well, I got to have the income. And I said, yeah, say more. Why is that? And she went on, well, I just got a new car and I financed my furniture purchase for my apartment. And she had 2 gym memberships, not one, but 2 gym memberships. She was eating out all the time with her friends and going to every concert imaginable. And I was like, okay, all these things are grand, but it sounds like you're building a bigger lifestyle and you have a really small life. Maybe you have it backwards. Maybe you need to build a bigger life, not a bigger lifestyle. And when I said it, it was like, that's what everyone needs to do, man. Build a bigger life for yourself, not a bigger lifestyle. It's the cars, the shoes, the restaurants, all that stuff. It's great, but it's fleeting. Like the
Mhm.
new car smell wears off, but a new car payment doesn't. And
Mhm.
so I've tried to really impart that wisdom to a lot of people, that if you want to live in a free and flexible and have lots of choice in your life, you have to do so by keeping your lifestyle compressed relative to your income, so that all of that extra you have goes to building your life even bigger, just like you've done. And you've done a masterful job of it.
Yes, yes, and it's those small things that people will say is sacrifices, right? But
Yeah.
if you decide, if you define your life, and for me, it was being able to do experiences rather
Yeah.
than getting the new car or whatever, right?
Totally.
Like I didn't buy a new car until I was like 30 years old.
Yeah.
Um, and but first it was used cars, Honda Civic and everything. Even working at a car company, I
Yeah.
still wasn't like, I'm not gonna buy a new car just because of so many things that happen once you buy it, right? The value goes down and all this other stuff. And I just needed
Yes.
something to take me from point A to point B with a car payment of $250, not
Right.
500 or 700, right? What are the things then, like, because you also have the book, the Build a Bigger Life Manifesto. What
Yes.
are those things that you talk about the book that you would like for people, that in order to win the money game, what are
Yeah.
those things that they need to take action on?
That book came about several years after Winning the Money Game came about. And one of the core tenets in the book, and I talk about, there are tenets of building a bigger life, and the tenets are like rules or guideposts along the way. And tenet number 7 in the book is make money irrelevant. So if you truly win the
Yes.
money game, you can make any decision you want without money being a primary driver, motivator, fear, or whatever. So today in our world, we live a very big life, and that looks like lavish trips. We take great vacations as a family. We get to spend time. I go to as many concerts as I want to go to, just because for me, it's the experience. I don't buy a lot of stuff, but stuff to me is more about significance today than anything else. So if it's not significant stuff, I don't really want it.
Mm-hmm.
And we have the ability to write, $50,000 and $100,000 checks into investments that produce cash flow on a monthly basis, allowing us to build an even bigger life as we go along.
Mm-hmm.
So the core tenets in the book that really started that for me, number one was, you have to understand what your core values is, like build on a strong values foundation. And when you know what that is, the people who are trying to fulfill happiness through lifestyle, like, oh, I'll feel happy when I buy that new Range Rover. No, you don't. You get in the Range Rover, it's like, this is dope. And then after about 2 months, you're like, yeah, it's a car. Like, it's a car, it has some bells and whistles, but it's not making me any happier necessarily. So what is the core value that you're trying to satisfy there? And for me, it was things like family, freedom, love, growth, connection. Those were the core values I was trying to fulfill. And then you create a bigger vision. And the bigger vision for your life is not just like, what am I going to do in a year or 3 years? But like you've done, what 10 years out and 20 years out is going to look like for you.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to build that bigger vision as you go along. And then it's all about asking yourself bigger questions. So not, how would I pay off my house? How would I pay off my house early? How would I pay off my house by next year? That's a bigger question. And your subconscious mind has to start churning on that to find the answers to it.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next, several tenets are really about how do you begin to implement all of those things, in order, so that your life gets bigger and bigger within the next year, not within 5 years. You'll notice like marked change in how happy you are in short order by following the manifesto.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And people can find that book on Amazon, or is there a website?
Yeah, on
You're gonna
Amazon,
put the link.
you can go look up Build a Bigger Life or search my name, Adam Carroll, on Amazon, and all my books will pop up.
That's awesome. That's awesome. We're definitely going to put a link on that. Now, two things then on how do people need to look at money so that
Yeah.
they can know that they're winning the money game?
So this is a great question, Diego, because there's really 2 or 3 things that I want to cover here. Number one is the idea that money is the most plentiful thing in the world. Next to oxygen, the government is printing more of it all the time. So to think that money is scarce or there is lack of money, that is a mentality issue. And so for me, what I've always believed is that there's $4 trillion circulating the globe on a daily basis. 4 trillion. It's a number that most of us can't even fathom. And all we have to do is take a little teaspoon into that river of money flowing every day, and we'll have way more than enough, way more than we'd ever need. And so the way to do that, the little teaspoon that you're dipping into, is the value you bring to the world. And so if you're bringing mass value, you're bringing a tablespoon, or you're bringing a cup, a quarter cup or a half cup or a full cup. Dipping into that becomes very easy. And you've done this masterfully over and over and over again, is you add tremendous value. You dip that, that teaspoon or tablespoon into the flow of 4 trillion, and magically your accounts get filled up. So number one, know beyond the shadow of a doubt that money is the most plentiful thing in the world, and it's all around you. You just have to figure out how to tap into it. Okay. Number two is around money itself, is that it is a vehicle, it is a tool, but it's not the end all be all. So someone can have a lot of money, but that does not equate to happiness. The money is simply a means to an end. So what is it that would make you happy? Is it freedom? Is it flexibility? Is it travel? Is it providing for your parents? What does that look like for you? Define that, and then go about creating money to fulfill that which makes you happy, right? That which is fulfilling to you. And for me, it's all those things: freedom, flexibility, having choice and option in my life, being able to take my family on amazing vacations, and create memories and, build for the future. That's exciting for me. And then sharing with other people how to do just that. And then last, and this is more of a mindset thing around money than anything, is building wealth is about a future orientation. And so people, generally speaking, are pretty good at making money. And you and I both know guys that they're great at making it, but they absolutely suck at keeping it. You know what I mean? So you can make it, but you got to know how to keep it. And you can keep it, but you got to know how to grow it. And it's in that order: make, keep, grow. And there's a lot of your listeners probably that are very good at making it, but they're terrible at keeping it. You may have some people that are really good at keeping it, but they're terrible at growing it. And so those three elements, if you can get really good at all three of those, and then you follow this idea that so long as you create a spread between your income and your expenses for as long as humanly possible, you'll be wealthy long into the future. Because it's that extra dough that you've kept, right, out of what you've made, and then you grow with. That's what will allow you to build wealth long term.
Yes. No, that is awesome. So those are the three key things. Number one, it talks about abundance, right? It's understanding that there's money that is out there for you to take. There's an abundance of it. Number two, you mentioned it is seeing money as a tool, not money as that's going to bring you that happiness.
That's right.
And then number three is knowing how to grow that money, like seeing from the making, keeping, grow. So yes, that's awesome. That's awesome.
We would call that the mastery of money, right? If you understand how to make it, how to keep it, how to grow it, and do all three of those really, really well, you are on the pursuit of mastery, meaning you've studied these things, you've learned about it. They're listening to this podcast and figuring out how to dominate real estate and how to create passive income and all those things. That is one path on the path of mastery.
Yeah. Now I know that you have built something called Shred My Mortgage that basically helps people be able to participate on that growth, right? Like once they make it, how do they keep it and how do they grow it? You've been able to help a lot of families be able to pay off their houses, be able to fund life insurance policies and do infinite banking from that perspective by using the method Shred. Can you share a little bit on that?
Yeah, the Shred method for me has, and I don't say this lightly, Diego, nothing has created more wealth for me and my family than following the Shred method. And the Shred method itself is basically the idea that if we exist in a banker's business model, and not to vilify bankers because it's a brilliant model, we should all own a bank because we'd all be, multimillionaires by doing so. But if we follow the banker's business model, the banks will make the money, guaranteed. And we will continue to pay the interest expense on that debt that we've acquired, we've taken from them. And so central to the Shred method is the understanding that there are two massive expenses we have in life. Number one is taxes, and number two is the interest expense on debt. And when we take out debt, now we take it out for good reasons. We could have good debt against a cash flow producing property. And I would do that every day, all day, right? If I knew there was a cash flow producing property, I would do that. But if I knew there was discretionary income at the end of the month, I would be using the Shred method to begin accelerating the payoff of that debt, the amortization table, which minimizes the amount of interest that I pay to the bank and maximizes the equity that I'm going to create in that property in short order. And so we have a couple of strategies in the midst of that help people minimize their expenses down to the ridiculous, maximize their income, and then use that extra discretionary to begin building real wealth, in the next several years. And I would say virtually anyone listening to this, within 10 years, you should be financially free. If you follow this system, no matter where you're at right now, could be deep in debt, could be not, is that if you follow this within 10 years time or less, you'll have more money coming in passive income than you will have in expenses.
That's awesome. Yes. And that's definitely a tool that once you begin to apply it, like you have to trust that process too.
Yes.
Right now, I feel like once you do that and understanding that interest is one of the biggest expense. So it comes like, how can you eliminate it? Right. that allows you to be able to fund different things in life. Now, once they pay off their house, let's say, or once half of it is paid off and stuff like that,
Yep.
I know that you have to do certain things, right? You have to get like a HELOC, a line of credit, to be able to then pay off. But can you explain the process of Shred?
Yeah. So very simply, and sometimes when I use some of the terminology, people's eyes glaze over. So I'm going to try and keep this as simple as possible, Diego.
Yeah.
But the idea is when you look at a mortgage and you look at the payoff of that mortgage, when is the majority of the interest charged on a mortgage?
It's usually in the beginning.
In the beginning, right? So if you took a traffic signal and you put it on its side over your mortgage, the first 10 years is red light. Like the majority of your money is going to interest. It's not going to principal. The second 10 years is yellow light. And that means that a little bit's going to principal, still going to interest, but it's starting to pivot, right? And by the last 10 years, you're in green light territory, which means the majority of your payments going to principal. But you know this being a realtor, how long do people on average stay in a home?
I mean, less than 10 years, let's say.
Yeah, let's say 7 probably on average, right?
Yeah.
So in 7 years' time, if you have paid dutifully on your mortgage and or maybe you've refinanced at least once, you're going to be entirely in red light the entire time you're in that home. And I don't know about you, but I've been at the closing table with people before who thought they were going to get a massive check at closing. And then they get there and they're disappointed because, by the time you pay realtors, closing costs, points, if you're buying down on the next place, all that stuff, there's not much left. And so what we do with the Shred method is we teach people that your income is the most powerful thing you can use, but we have to use it very strategically. And most people are not very strategic with it. So as a metaphor for this, if you were to leave your home in the morning, Diego, to go to the grocery store, and you knew that you had to go to the post office later that afternoon, so you drive home after the grocery store, would you leave your car idling in the driveway all day long in anticipation of going to the post office at 4 p.m.? No. And I know you drive a Tesla, so it wouldn't even idle. It would just like shut off itself. But,
little bit. Yeah.
So, but if you had a gas guzzler, you would not do it because it's inefficient, burn gas, terrible on the environment, et cetera, et cetera. Yet what most people do is they let their income idle in a checking account for days and weeks and months on end, right? So they get paid, money goes in checking, the money sits there and it starts to dwindle little by little while they do ACH transactions and bill pay and swipe their debit card and things like that. But what the Shred method does is it says, hey, instead of parking that money in your checking account, let's park it in what we call a Shred account, which is basically sort of like a line of credit account. So we're using that money when it's efficient to use it, and we're not using it when it's not efficient to use it. And the way we're using it is we're blasting away that amortized debt, which builds equity in your property, and it reduces the amount of interest you pay on the mortgage itself, typically to the tune of tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars in interest. And so, what we're doing is we're showing people you're not going to change your lifestyle much at all. You're just going to change the way the cash flow goes through your system. And our system is engineered based on a soft piece of software that's based on an algorithm. And the algorithm's running constantly saying, it looks like this much is coming in, this much is going out. It looks ahead for the next few months. And based on the data we've plugged into it, it's going to give you recommended lump sum amounts to send to your mortgage to begin bringing that down, or your car payments or student loans or whatever else.
Yeah, man. And then, so this is definitely a strategy that people can take on to be able to pay off debt faster and basically become that bank, because then once you have that equity, then you can do other things. Now, can you share, because I know some of the people, and one of the things that you do is you use part of that equity that you're building into a life insurance policy.
Yep.
Right. So in a simple way, you're basically becoming your own bank, because with life insurance, you can borrow that cash value. And I know we're getting technical, but this is freaking awesome, because if you figure out how to arbitrage money, because you're making with the life insurance, you can borrow that cash value, let's say at 5%, right? But that
Yes.
whole chunk of money is making money at like 7% or 8%, as an example.
Correct.
You're still making that 3% arbitrage, but you're borrowing money at 5%, but the idea is that you put that money to work into other assets that are making you 10, 12%, or as a hard money loan or on a flip or something.
Yep.
Can you share a little bit on infinite banking from that perspective?
Totally. And I'll give you like a really concrete example, Diego, because it might help. So we had a client that had a $300,000 mortgage. They, within about 18 months, now this is a couple, dual income, but together they were probably making take home maybe 10 grand a month. Okay. And they probably had expenses of around 7 grand a month. So between mortgage payment, kid expenses, car loans, all that stuff, they had 3 grand left over in discretionary money. So the very first thing we did with Shred was we knocked out cars and we knocked out any credit cards that were hanging out over their head. And it freed up another $1,000 a month in discretionary income. So now they're at 4 grand a month in, discretionary money, extra money every month. When that is plugged into the Shred method, they took a $300,000 mortgage down to around 180, 170 within about 18 months. Okay. And so they're blasting away their mortgage in record time. At that point, what they did was they recast their mortgage, which is different than a refinance. And I'll tease that for those of you out there, you want to go look it up. But essentially, it resets your mortgage without having to refinance or go back to a big, long 30-year fixed. And so their payment, which was once, I think, like $2,500 a month, was down to about $1,600 a month. So they cleared up another $900 a month in discretionary money. So if you're tracking on this, what started out as 7 grand in expenses is now more like 5 grand in expenses. So they have $5,000 left over every month. And through this system, what we encourage them to do then is say, hey, why don't you overfund a cash value life insurance policy and begin building your own bank of money? Okay. And when we do the math for them based on what they're shredding, they could afford in the neighborhood of $75,000 a year in premium. So you're writing a $75,000 check, goes into the life insurance policy, and it becomes a bank of money that you can now turn around and go out and do exactly what you said. Lend it, buy a syndication, put money as a down payment on a rental property, whatever you want. And the power of that money is that you get to decide when, how, and if it's paid back. So when it's paid back, like imagine going to your banker and saying, I'd like to borrow 50 grand, but I'm going to tell you when the payments are made and how much the payments are going to be. What would they do if you went in there and told them that, Diego?
They will laugh and then tell you, go somewhere else.
Yeah, you clearly don't know how this works. We hold the purse strings here. And yet when you hold the purse strings on your own bank, you get to decide when those payments are made. You get to decide how much they are. So over the course of 3 years' time, these folks ended up putting around $200,000 into their infinite banking policy. And 200 grand in cash is sitting there making, I think in their policy, they were making around 6% guaranteed per year, right? And that's because it is a contractual obligation by the insurance company to pay you 2.5 to 3.5%. And generally speaking, they're going to give you another 2.5 to 3% in dividends every year. So if they're making 6% on 200 grand, that's 12 grand a year that's getting dumped back into either buy more insurance, create more cash value, or what have you. Well, what these folks did in the midst of that was they would take 100 grand at a time and put it either in syndications or in hard money lending for flips, people that they knew that were doing flips and were good for it. And they would make anywhere from 12 to 15, and in some cases 20% on that money. And so as soon as they lend the money out and they get the money back in, they just refill that bucket again. And now they have a big, bucket full of money in that infinite banking policy, plus whatever it is they made in interest on top of that. And this is the power that when we talk about doing this for a period of time, 18 to 24 months of shredding will then be enough to begin building this infinite banking policy. And if you do infinite banking for the next 2 to 3 years, you have enough cash in there that you can go start, you could go pay cash for some of the deals that you're looking at, right? And have straight cash flow on it. What it does is it creates a whole lot of liquidity, but a whole lot of options for you as an investor that you wouldn't normally have if all of your investments are just locked in qualified funds in the market, as an example.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And that is basically when you have that capability to be able to invest money that way, that's when money that, as you mentioned, is a tool, it can become irrelevant, right?
Yes.
Because then at that point, so at what point would you say, hey, now I don't have to focus as much in my active income because now I can live off the passive income, right?
Yeah.
From the investments that my
It's a
cash
great
value
question.
policy is building and all that stuff.
So there's two things to keep in mind. As you shred, one of the things that happens is your monthly expenses go down. So your fixed monthlies, like your mortgage, car payment goes away, credit card payment goes away if you've been financing things over time. Student loans go away. We get rid of all that stuff, automatically. On the mortgage, your payment's going to remain the same until we do a recast, right? Or until we pay it off, whichever comes first. But as you go through shred, your bills keep getting lower and lower and lower. Now, you might spend a little bit more going out to eat, or you might take a vacation here or there. That's all good. The system is very fluid in that. But our goal is to get to a point where, let's say, my family of 5, not to brag about it, but we can live very comfortably on $3,500 a month, like very comfortably on $3,500. And part of the reason is we've shredded for a long time. We've built enough, assets and reserves that it's making extra money. And our number was, can we make enough in passive income to supersede $3,500 a month in expenses? And so when you have enough money in that infinite banking policy that's now been invested in vehicles that are churning out $3,500 plus a month, right, in cash flow, you're financially free. And so it becomes a very easy equation for people who say, I want to retire early. Cool. Let's create certainty around that. What is the number you need to make more than in order to hit that financial freedom point? And our goal is to get it down to a point where you're feeling super comfortable with it, and then maximize your investments so that your passive income is greater than your monthly expenses.
Yes. No, exactly. Exactly. And thank you for sharing that example and all about shred, because this is definitely something that people should be able to learn more. Where is what's the website that people can learn more on this?
If people, if you want to find out more, if this has intrigued you at all, go to theshredmethod.com. And we have a masterclass there where you can watch, a 20 to 30 minute sort of demo of how this works. It's the what, the why, and the how. And then what we encourage people to do is fill out our savings analysis, which will tell you how fast could you be out of debt and how much total could you save in interest. And then if that is intriguing to you, and I always tell anyone, if you have a less than 7-year number, get on a phone call with us, 20 minutes, we'll run your exact numbers and show you just how much interest you could save and how fast you could be out of debt. But furthermore, show you the strategy that will get you to a point where you are absolutely certain of your ability to stop work, to make work optional if you wanted to. We can show you exactly what that number is. And I think that's where most advisors today, they fall down, because it's like, well, hopefully by 65, 62, maybe, depending on how the market does. That's all bullshit. Like, what if the market doesn't do what we think it's going to do? What if it's flat or sideways for the next 5 years? Unless you're trading options or doing something creative, it's not going up. It's staying put. And somebody, if you're invested from 50 to 55 and it doesn't do anything, well, your number retiring at 62 is going to change. And so we want to create certainty for people where they go, it doesn't matter what the market's doing. I know beyond the shadow of a doubt, I can afford this. And this is what I'm going to. Because then, just like you've done, Diego, as your income goes up, so can your lifestyle, right?
Yeah.
Because your life is huge. your lifestyle's still super commensurate with where your income's at. It's less than, right? I mean, you don't, no way do you spend more than you make ever.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
And the goal is to keep it that way for the rest of forever, because now you are building generational wealth.
Exactly. Now, one of the things that you talk about is the freedoms, right? And we basically covered money freedom. But one of the things that you've taught me is there's other freedoms. Can you share a little bit about that?
Yes. I learned this from a software engineer years ago at a conference, who the dude got up at a conference and he said, "My name is Matt. I sold my first software company for $14 million. And then he sat down, and I leaned over and I go, "Can you teach me everything? Tell me what you know." And he said, "Adam, everyone wants money, but what do you want money for?" And I was like, "Gosh, if I had it, I'd have time to do X, Y, and Z." And he's like, "Exactly. You want financial freedom because you want time freedom. So if you had time freedom, what would you do with it?" And I said, "Oh, I'd spend time with, people that I care about. My grandparents were alive at the time. I told him someday I'll have kids I want to hang out with all the time." And he said, "You want time freedom so that you have relationship freedom, right? Because those who have time, they spend time with people they want to spend time with, not those they have to spend time with." And he goes, "What would you do with these people?" And I said, "I don't know. I'd just be of service. I'd counsel them. I'd coach them. I would support them in whatever they were doing." He goes, "You would be of service, because what people are after ultimately is service freedom. This idea that we're put on this earth not to be employed. We were put on this earth to be deployed, and to be deployed and be of service to others. That's what we are called to do. But we get so mired in lifestyle that we lose all of the rest of it: financial, time, relationship, and service. So if we can create financial freedom, we can create time freedom and relationship freedom and service freedom. And those are the 4 legacies."
Yes. No, that is it's crazy, because you taught me this back in freaking 2011, and I've implemented all of that in my life, and we're talking 10, 12 years later.
Yes.
It's crazy, because now with FI investors and everything, that's what we're doing. Like, that's why I'm doing what I'm doing, right? It's that service freedom, and that transitioning from the money freedom to time freedom to then relationship freedom and service freedom. So that's amazing. Adam, we're definitely going to have you back, and I want to go deeper in the freedoms and also psychology of money too, because you're a wealth of knowledge. I've heard you giving like 4 different types of keynote presentations, speaking in so many different ways. But where can people find you? Where can people learn more about you?
Yeah. Thank you for asking, Diego. It's adamcarroll.info is my website, which has a little bit of everything that I do. And obviously theshredmethod.com is where we're posting a lot of educational videos and articles and things like that. And then on Instagram, adam.carroll is my handle, and I post there from time to time. So check me out there. DM me anytime you want. I get back to people right away. And hello at the Shred Method is where you can submit questions. But we love helping people, Diego. I mean, like, we get giddy about payoff stories. Like, I just got an email today. A guy said, "We've paid off 2 properties. We're going on to our 3rd. We've created more cash flow." It's amazing. So excited to help.
That's awesome. That's awesome, Adam. Well, thank you very much for being a mentor, being in my life. You have been amazing, and a lot of people from the mastermind have heard your story too, and helping them win the money game. So we'll definitely be in touch, and definitely have to have you for the second one. But thank you so much for your time, brother.
Yeah, thank you, man.
Thank you for listening to the FI Investors Podcast. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. And share this with a fellow real estate investor who you think would find value in what we do. Until next time.